Hello and welcome back to Quarterlight, your car brochure channel. In today's episode, we're continuing our Vauxhall story for 1980. We're now up to the Cavalier Sports Hatch. Hello and welcome back. Now, if you're new to Quarterlight, we're a car brochure channel here on YouTube, looking at car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, and sometimes beyond that as well. So if you're interested in cars, car brochures, looking back at cars gone by, then please consider subscribing. It is all completely free. Now, as regular viewers will know, we've been looking through this 1980 Vauxhall range for the UK. Last week we looked at the Cavalier, and we kind of kept the Cavalier Sports Hatch separate, so that's going to be today's treat. So I'll throw that on the board and kind of give you a recap of where we're up to. Okay then, so I've thrown that brochure on the board, and as you can see, Vauxhall all-model catalogue, summer 1980, regulars will be familiar. We looked at the Chevette, we looked at the all-new Astra, which sort of marked that change for Vauxhalls. Then we looked at the Mark I Cavalier, and we kind of saved the Cavalier Sports Hatch because it kind of fell in a different segment, really. The thing with Opel and Vauxhall being sold at the same time in the UK at this time was the room for both being sold. You could argue things like the Chevette was free to be sold, but very much an aging model. Astra was just the new Kadette, so it struggled a little bit, I guess. Cavalier, well, what can I say about the Cavalier? The nice thing about the Cavalier was it had a different front end to the Ascona, so it made a little bit of a separate sort of, which front end do you prefer at the end of the day. The problem with the Cavalier Sports Hatch, what we're looking at today, is, well, it was a Manta, so it shared that same sort of droop snoot idea with the Opel Manta for that sportier look. So a strange model, and of course eventually it was dropped and Vauxhall sold their cars, and one of the cars they sold eventually was the Opel Manta. So this kind of strange sort of segment kind of disappeared for Vauxhall. Anyway, we'll go to the Vauxhall Sports Hatch page, see what the trim levels were like at that time, and then we'll have a look at the Opel brochure for the same period and see how that compares. Okay, so the Cavalier Sports Hatch page. More of this driving round in the dusty grounds for whatever reason, no idea. Cavalier GLS is the main image. There is some text, so let's have a look at that first. Okay, it doesn't really say much for an introduction, actually. It just says Cavalier Sports Hatch, combining style with useful load capacities, really, which is not the most inspiring start to this, what is possibly a more enthusiast's version of the Cavalier. There is that dusty image, but like I say, it's not a great shot. It's a bit blurry, and the registration plate looks all wonky on there as they put it on afterwards. Other little images on this first page. We get this little bit of image, which 100% that colour has definitely been changed on there, so it looks a little bit odd. And then a couple of these green examples, but let's move to the page proper. So this is the first model up here, the Cavalier GL. Previously, actually, just thinking back to 1979 and the Vauxhall brochure we looked at before, they did a slightly different thing back then, but we'll come to that in a moment. And it's strange again, we'll look at those edited pictures from the two brochures, a little bit odd. But like I said, Cavalier GL is the first one up. Tells us a 3-door sports hatch, style with space, and 1600 power. Makes pretty good sense, but like I said, it'll be a bit weird in a moment, but I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. We'll read this text and then we'll just see what specs there are, and then I'll just throw that other brochure up for some peculiarities. So it tells us the sporty image of this GL Sports Hatch is confirmed by the performance delivered by its powerful 1600 engine, and with superb road holding and handling to match. There's seating for up to 5 people and quick convertibility into useful load carrier with a useful, I think tells you about how much cubic feet are in there, available with the rear seat down and the hinged rear parcel shelf removed. It goes on to tell us ribbed velour cloth seats sets off the comfortable equipped interior, and there's plenty of space for wanted on journey items with 2 sizable door pockets, a capacious glove box plus oddment trays on the long centre console. It then goes on to tell us some of the equipment, which it tells us the Cavalier GL Sports Hatch has over the basic L saloon. So things like ribbed velour seats, which is certainly a nice approved seat for this model. So even though it was only a GL, and we'll talk about it in a moment with the next brochure, still nicely spec'd actually. Fold down rear seats, carpeted lower doors, hinged rear parcel shelf, etc, etc. I'm not going to read it all out, to be honest with you, but of course you can pause the screen if you do want to read it all. I'm just going to move the camera down now, and that's kind of like the rest of your equipment. So such niceties as sports road wheels, which we'll certainly have a look at, and then obvious things like a GL tailgate badge. Choice of 7 colours for this one. We could option it up though with an auto transmission, metallic paint, sliding steel sunroof, and rather nicely alloy road wheels. Gives us some little images, and the practicality of it being a hatch, even though it's a sporty, at least a sporty looking car, if not much more. And also that availability for lowering that back seat. We get this image, which is actually rather nicely shown, is that back seat folded to give that sort of flexibility. No head restraints though, you'll notice, unusually on this model, and a very black interior, but certainly the seats would have been, at least felt really nice. And then this rather beautiful example in this metallic green colour. Looks wonderful, a really nice car, Cavalier GL Sports Hatch. I'm sure it would have attracted a lot of people because it is a good looking car at the end of the day. It's generally just a rebadged Manta really in one sense, but it is a good looking car. I do like those sports road wheels. I always like when Vauxhall did that blacked out section on the back. Nice Vauxhall script on the back there. Really, you don't really question it too much, do you? Well, until we throw on the previous brochure for 78 and it all of a sudden gets a little bit odd. So firstly to note, in the 78 brochure, which I've now thrown on now, these sort of sport hatches and coupes as seen here are all lumped in to the same brochure, to the same segment as Cavalier. There isn't that separate sort of segment for them. And also 2 models, but slightly different models in some ways. First of all, we had the 2-door coupe, which appears to have gone. Kind of like an unusual looking car. Very sort of Manta-esque, isn't it, really, in many ways. But I think I preferred the Sport Hatch rather than this anyway. But this doesn't seem to be around. Only showing available with a 2 litre and a GLS spec. We turn the page, and the only other model in is the actual Sports Hatch, which, yeah, fair enough, we've still got that, we've seen it in the new brochure. And this is the only one though, 3-door Sports Hatch, choice of a 1600 or 2 litre. But hey, hold on a minute. Are we using exactly the same image? Well, yes we are. So they've done some more editing, even though supposedly they're a different spec vehicle. This is a GLS. The newer version showing the GL, which is peculiar. Even down to, the same seats by the looks of it. I'm pretty sure that's the same picture as what we've just looked at. Oh, they have edited in that one. So let's just zoom in. So yeah, they've used exactly the same image, done the old clever sort of editing rather than bothering, who would take new pictures, why bother? It looks pretty much identical, but they have sort of edited it slightly. The older version, which was the GLS, has got some wood up here by the looks of it. This is just a black panel, which they've obviously just coloured in, I guess, to show that. It's even showing the same sort of image for the sort of hatch open, but a slightly different, well, it's slightly little trimmed a little bit differently. The main image is the same picture, and then you think, well, how can you do that? Because the new one's a GL, the old one's a GLS, which in some ways shows you how little difference there was between the GL and the GLS, I guess. But if we zoom in, the new brochure, the 1980 brochure, is the lower one, the GL. The GLS is up here. So for the new one, what they've had to do is edit all these badges on there. So one thing they did for the newer models, they kind of like swapped the badges around. Previously, you know, your engine size was over here. It would have said Cavalier over here, but they kind of like swapped them around. So they kind of like updated the badges, so they would have had to done that in some kind of force or editing department. The Vauxhall script was now bigger for 1980, and we've got a mandated fog light that they've had to draw on there as well. But weird how they've used the same image, really, isn't it? And like I say, it just shows how different they were in reality between these two models, 78 and 80. 78 brochure now, you can see that sort of different script for Cavalier. We've gone to this sort of like italic type script with the GLS at the end there. Smaller Vauxhall script in the centre on that black panel, and of course no fog light on this one because you didn't have to, basically. So it is unusual, isn't it, how they've kind of like gone through these two models, and you often see it with an updated version. Very rarely you see it with a completely or inferior, completely different spec model, going from a GL to a GLS. So there we go. I've tried to put them next to each other, at least the best I could, and you can see that sort of editing. You can also see some of the angles not quite right in the badging as well on there, but overall, yeah, they've done a little bit of an update on there, haven't they? And I never understood. Surely it would be easy just to get a new car, even if you just put it in the car park and take some pictures, maybe edit the background. But they seem to think that was an easier and more cost-effective way of doing it. But certainly in the late 70s, early 80s, I'm sure it would have been quite a complex process to actually do that with these cars. But like I say, in some ways shows how different they were in many ways too. Anyway, let's move on. Enough waffle about this random brochure geekery. Let's move on to the next model. And then that leaves us with the next model in the sports hatch range, which was the GLS. So you'd think this is the one you would do the editing on, but I guess the GL was more similar to the GLS in 78, which is something to say, isn't it? And certainly we've got a nice looking interior on this later GLS. Available with a 1600 or a 2 litre now, so you could get a nice 2 litre version. Text wise, it tells us the Cavalier can seat up to 5, or it can be quickly converted to carry that extra bulky load. Ideal for the motorist who likes a sporty car for family and leisure use, but at times needs extra load carrying capacity. What's more, the sports hatch drives and performs as good as it looks. The 2 litre engine can sweep it smoothly into 100 miles per hour plus figures, and the lively 1600 not far behind. And with that sort of road holding and handling that will complement most drivers. The all-coil suspension with front and rear anti-roll bars, wide section radial tyres and sensitive rack and pinion steering all contribute to the tautness and driving precision that is a Cavalier trademark. It then goes on to tell us about all the extras above the GL version. So we've got things like head restraints in there now, and a cloth door trim, 4-spoke steering wheel, tinted glass all round, laminated screen, options, auto transmission, metallic paint, sliding steel sunroof and alloy road wheels. Overall, it wasn't a huge jump up from the GL, but I think the front things that they actually put on there were actually nice things, meaning sort of like armrests and nicer seats with an actual head restraint on there now. And there is that nicer interior. We also get other images as well. This beautiful example in red. We get a sort of a dashboard shot rather nicely, showing the radio in there. Also showing us we do get a rev counter. Quite a comprehensive list of instrumentation there, really. I think voltmeter, oil pressure gauge, etc. There is this rather beautiful example in red. I do really like actually the Sports Hatch GLS version. It is a nice looking car. We can't really say too much against that, but so was the Manta really, so that was its main problem. No rear wash wipe, interestingly. I don't know if it was kind of like one of those vehicles where the streamlining meant it didn't really need one. Maybe it was too flat, I don't know, but in today's eyes at least it looks a little bit weird not having that rear wash wipe on there. The problem of course is that we did have the Manta being sold at the same time, so essentially the same car, and in fact you can actually see that it's still being sold as that sort of coupe version as well as this Sports Hatch looking version. Very nice looking cars. Eventually, you know, as Vauxhall and Opel properly merged in the 80s, we got rid of that sort of Sports Hatch idea, and interestingly in the Vauxhall range we just had this badged as an Opel Manta and sold in the Vauxhall dealerships, didn't we? And I can understand why really. I don't know why, the Opels always seem to be, in my mind, a more sportier brand. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I always kind of like feel this. And of course, when you put this more of a droop snoot on the Opel, then the Vauxhall makes little sense really at this time. Anyway, we'll look at the text, then we'll have another look at these lovely images. Now we can kind of see them maybe a little bit more high spec than the Vauxhall versions. So interestingly at the top it tells us if you like a sports car but need family car space, here's the classic solution, the Opel Manta. Really exactly the same that it said in the Vauxhall brochure for the Vauxhall Sports Hatch, isn't it really? Family car, but the space, because it's a hatchback, get the Manta now. Although that doesn't really make sense because we do also have that sort of more coupe version with the boot, which wouldn't be as practical of course. Anyway, it says despite its thoroughbred looks and exhilarating performance, it's a practical 4-seater with high levels of comfort, economy and reliability. So whether you opt for the sleek elegance of the Berlinetta Coupe or versatility of the Berlinetta Hatch with its big tailgate and fold down rear seats, you'll enjoy 2-litre performance and taut safe handling. Interesting. So it's just going for a 2-litre on this version. Keen drivers will appreciate the wide alloy wheels shod with low profile radial tyres, the full instrumentation and the headlamp wash wipe system. You know, I'm really bringing you over to the Opel point of view now. I'm sure you're more interested now. And discerning passengers will notice the smooth, well-controlled ride and lavishly equipped interior with rich velour upholstery, deep cut pile carpeting and bronze tinted glass. What's more, both Mantas have that well put together feel that's so typically Opel and stands for long life and a high resale value. And you can make your Manta even more special with such options as automatic transmission, an SR handling pack, that's an interesting one, steel sunroof and metallic paint. Try a Manta and find out what you've been missing. So like I said, I kind of like feel a little bit more high spec, so maybe what Vauxhall were trying to do is fit the Sports Hatch somewhere in here, because you know you can certainly get that 1600 GL, which I'm sure would have been a much cheaper car, you know. So they find a way of working these models and trying to fit them together, even though they're struggling at this time. And like I say, they do eventually resolve all that for the UK market. Images wise, doesn't really give us any sort of idea what specs these are, just random pictures, but certainly straight away it looks more sporty, I think, particularly that door card. We get this tiny little image of this booted version, but very nice alloy wheels. The hatch version with very bright red seats. I'm kind of like thinking that's probably been highlighted at some point in some kind of like editing suite. But certainly it looks more sporty, doesn't it, with that sort of red carpet and that red lower panel. I do like how that's put together. This is the auto though, but looking down there, headlamp wash wipe. Here is the booted version. Berlinetta, it tells us on the side, so it does give us an idea which model this is, showing those nice wipers and some rather nice alloy wheels. And then the hatch version again, shod with those alloy wheels. This rather lovely is the SR version, so that would be certainly a very interesting model. If you note also, we do get rear wash wipe on these Mantas, so possibly it was needed. Extremely long arm on there though, isn't it? So you liked the Cavalier Sport Hatch until you came over to the Opel dealer, is my mind. But like I say, certainly that lower spec sports hatch, the 1.6 GL, was probably the model to go for if you was in the Vauxhall dealer. If you wanted something a bit more special, I personally would say travel over to the Opel dealer. Unfortunately, we're a bit late. Sorry to, I don't know if you realise, but these are now all gone. But certainly a very nice sort of like competitor to the Capri is what I always thought of with the Manta. So there we go, the Vauxhall Sports Hatch and the Opel Mantas. Which one of you would have gone for? Interesting to know. Like I say, the budget model was an interesting one, that 1.6 GL, because it was quite well spec'd actually with velour seats, but the sporty version seemed to be more in the the Opel garage. And also, your other option is just to go to Ford and get a Ford Capri. Now, I did own a Ford Capri. I never owned a Vauxhall Sports Hatch or an Opel Manta, but I kind of like always wanted to do, to kind of like compare it to the Capri, because the Capri never really inspired me. I understand why people like them. I had it for probably a year, and I was kind of like, it's not doing anything for me. It was only a 1.6 laser though, so maybe a larger engine version may have pleased me more, but didn't do much for me. And I always remember driving the Capri and looking at Mantas feeling quite envious, although somebody once said they own both and the Mantas weren't as good build quality. I never thought the Capri was particularly good build quality though, but anyway, I'm waffling. Let me know in the comments your views. Next week we'll continue this Vauxhall story, but we'll end by saying, as we always do, please do consider subscribing. It is completely free. Like I say, I know a lot of people still don't realise that, but it is free, so please do tap that little subscribe button. Helps you see the videos you want to see and more likely to see my newer videos, particularly if you hit the little bell button on there. We'll end with this rather beautiful Cavalier GLS Sports Hatch. Certainly one thing about the Sports Hatch, I'm sure it's a rarer car around today. I would imagine there aren't as many as the Manta, but like I said, thank you so much for watching today. Please do take care. I've added a couple of boxes there. One's going to be for the series, so eventually they're all going to be there, so we can watch them all in one fell swoop. And another, I'll probably just put another random video on there. But thank you so much for watching. Please do take care. We'll see you very soon. All the best and goodbye.